The stranger in the smoke. The air was thick with dust and smoke. The sky above was dark red from the burning clouds and the broken moon. David walked slowly through the ash-covered ground, his boots crunching over cracked stones and burnt metal. Was alone, but his instincts told him he was being watched. He paused behind a broken rock wall and looked around. His visor picked up movement just ahead. Through the smoke he saw a figure crouched low, barely visible, but trembling. It was not human. The skin was pale with a faint bluish tint, and long fingers clutched something small close to the chest. David moved a little closer, slowly, carefully. One wrong move and he could scare her off, or worse, trigger a panic. The figure noticed him and tried to back away, but stumbled. Her legs were too weak and her arms too tired. She fell to the ground, and the thing she was holding let out a soft, weak cry. David's heart jumped. It was a baby, not human, but crying just like any other infant. He lowered his weapon and raised both hands, showing he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said in a calm voice. "I'm not here to hurt you." Alien woman looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. Her face was dirty and her cheeks sunken from hunger. Her arms tightened around the baby as if someone might take it away. Her body shook from the cold, or maybe from fear, or both. David reached into his side pouch and pulled out a ration bar. He unwrapped it slowly and placed it on a flat stone between them. Then he stepped back. The woman stared at the food but didn't move. Her eyes flipped between David and the ration bar. "Go on," he said gently. "For you and your child." She hesitated for a long moment. Then with shaking hands she grabbed the bar and quickly took a bite. She chewed slowly like she hadn't eaten in days. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down at her baby, who was now silent and weak in her arms. She broke off a piece and gently placed it in the baby's mouth. The small mouth moved just a little, accepting the food. David knelt down, still keeping his distance, and watched quietly. He noticed the torn fabric around her side stained with blood. She was injured and too weak to move far. Her clothes looked like they had once been part of a uniform, but now they were torn, dirty, and hanging loose. "What happened to you?" he asked in a soft voice. The woman didn't answer. She just looked at him. Her eyes were filled with pain, but also something else, something like confusion or disbelief. "You don't have to speak. Just nod if you understand." Mesh gave the faintest nod. "Okay. Good, that's good. I'm David. I have a shelter not far from here. You can rest there. I have more food and clean water." The woman didn't move. She held her baby tighter. "You don't trust me, I get it. But your child is starving and you're hurt. I can't leave you like this." She blinked slowly. More tears came, but she wiped them away with the back of her hand. Still silent, she tried to stand, but her legs gave out again. David moved forward quickly but stopped when she flinched. He opened his jacket and took out a small thermal blanket. Slowly he extended it toward her. She stared at it, then at him. Finally she reached out and took it with one trembling hand. She wrapped the blanket around her baby first, then around herself. Her body relaxed just a little, not much, but enough. David saw the exhaustion in her eyes and the way she cradled the baby so gently. This wasn't a soldier or a threat. This was a mother on the edge of collapse. He looked around, making sure the area was still quiet. No patrols, no drones. Just broken buildings and empty winds. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. Then, "I'll help you. We'll take it slow, I promise." He reached out his hand again. This time, after a pause, she placed her hand in his. It was cold, thin, and shaking, but alive. And in that small moment, something shifted between them. David had come looking for spare parts and supplies, but what he found instead was a broken alien woman with nothing left but her child. And for reasons he didn't fully understand, he knew he wasn't going to walk away. As he helped her up, she leaned on him, weak and silent. The baby let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh. David looked down and saw the child's eyes open briefly. "Let's get you both somewhere safe," he whispered. With that, they walked slowly through the smoke together. David walked carefully with the alien woman leaning against him. Her body was weaker. Steps slow, but she refused to let go of her baby. Even as she struggled to move, she held the child close to her chest, wrapped in the thermal blanket. David could feel how light she was, like she hadn't eaten in many days. the baby made small, soft noises barely louder than the wind. They reached a small cave at the edge of the ruins. David used this place before as a temporary shelter. It was hidden from the sky and blocked from the cold winds. He had left some supplies there just in case he ever came back. He pulled open the broken metal cover and helped the woman inside. The ground was hard but dry, and the air was warmer than outside. "Sit here," he said, gently helping her to rest against the cave wall. She slowly sat down and clutched her baby as if she feared someone might take it away again. David opened his pack and took out a heat canister. He tapped it, and it began to glow with a soft warmth. The woman stared at it like it was magic. He placed it near her so the warmth could reach both her and the child. He took out more food, 2 ration bars, and a sealed water pouch. He opened one bar and handed it to her. She looked at it, then at him, unsure. "It's safe," he said. "You need this, and your baby too." Her hand moved slowly as she took it. She broke off a small piece again for the child. The baby's mouth moved weakly but accepted the food. She smiled faintly for the first time and then took a bite herself. Her eyes closed as she chewed. She looked like she might cry again, but held it back. David passed her the water pouch. She drank slowly, carefully, not wasting a single drop. Some of it she poured into a small cap and let the baby drink. A soft cooing sound came from the child, not a cry, but something better, something alive. After some time, David spoke again. "You have a name?" he asked softly. She looked at him, then pointed to herself and said with a rough voice, "Renia." Nodded. "Renia, that's a beautiful name. I'm David." She gave the smallest nod again. David pulled out a small med kit and pointed at her side. She looked down at her torn uniform and the wound hidden beneath it. She didn't speak, but she shifted slightly, lifting the fabric. Her side was bruised and bleeding. The skin looked burned. "I can help with that," he said. "It'll sting, but it'll stop the bleeding." Renia closed her eyes, then nodded once. He cleaned the wound and applied a healing patch. Her body flinched at first, but then relaxed as the medicine began to work. "You were running from something, weren't you?" he asked. Renia opened her eyes slowly. She nodded again. This time her lips moved, but no sound came. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to tell me now. You need rest." David took off his outer jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She looked surprised but didn't resist. She pulled it close with one arm and held her child with the other. Baby made a soft gurgling noise and reached out one tiny hand. It touched David's arm, and he smiled. "Strong little one," he said. "You're a fighter just like your mother." Renia looked at him with wide eyes. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say something. She struggled for the words and then whispered very softly, "Why?" David leaned closer. "What do you mean, why?" "Help me," she whispered again. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered, "Because." No one else did. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. This time the silence between them felt different. It wasn't fear, it was something like understanding. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. Naya held her baby tighter. The child was now sleeping, its breathing steady. David could see her body was no longer shaking as much. She looked tired, yes, but no longer terrified. David sat down near the cave entrance, keeping watch. He checked his scanner. No signals nearby, but he knew they couldn't stay here long. Not if someone was looking for her. Not if she was hunted. Still, for tonight they were safe. He looked back at Renia. She was already leaning back against the cave wall, eyes half closed, the baby sleeping in her arms. His jacket wrapped around her, her body finally warm, her hunger eased at least for now, and for the first time in days David felt something stir in his chest, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. He hadn't just saved a stranger, he had saved a mother. David sat near the entrance of the cave, keeping watch as the cold wind howled outside. His eyes scanned the dark sky above while his ears listened for anything unusual. Every now and then he checked the scanner, but the screen remained clear still. His instincts told him this peace wouldn't last inside. Renia lay resting, the baby sleeping in her arms. Her chest rose and fell in soft rhythm. The warmth from the heat canister had helped. Her face looked softer now, not so full of fear and pain. David didn't want to disturb her, but questions filled his mind. Who was she running from? What had happened to her ship? Why was she left behind with no supplies, no guards, no protection? As the fire's glow flickered, shadows moved along the cave walls. David reached into his backpack and pulled out a small recording device. He turned the volume low and pressed play. A broken transmission played through static. Vessel 93, crew down. Signal failing. Child alive. Repeat. Child alive. The voice was female, not Renya, but clearly the same alien language. The translation algorithm tried to adjust but couldn't fill in the missing pieces. David listened again and again, then paused the device. He looked back at her. Something about the voice stirred a deep sense of urgency. David whispered to himself, that signal came from this area. It has to be connected. Naya stirred, then slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze met his, but this time she didn't flinch. "You're safe," he said softly. "You slept a while, that's good." She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the child. She looked at David's face, then at the small device in his hand. Her eyes widened and her lips parted in silent recognition. "You heard it," he said. "You know this voice?" Nodded slowly. Her voice was weak, but she spoke. "Yes." "My sister." David leaned forward. "Is she still alive?" Renya shook her head slowly. "Ship attacked. Everything gone. Only me and child left." David's jaw tightened. "Who attacked?" She closed her eyes. A moment passed before she whispered, "The Red Sun Raiders." David cursed under his breath. The Red Sun Raiders were infamous. They targeted transport ships, especially ones carrying refugees or supplies. They sold everything and everyone to the code black markets, ruthless, violent, feared across many systems. "They left you for dead," he said. She nodded. "They took my people. I hid in escape pod, the baby." Only chance. David stared at her. He felt rage bubbling inside, not just at what happened, but at the thought that no one had come for her. Not her people, not the Alliance, not anyone. She had been forgotten. He stood up and paced a little, thinking, "We need to move soon. This cave isn't safe for long. They may still be tracking the Podrinya." Hugged her baby tighter. "Where?" "Go, there's an old bunker, not far from here," he said. "Hidden under rock and trees. I used to use it during recon missions. More food, water, weapons, even medical supplies. It'll be safer there." She nodded again. This time with more trust in her eyes. David began to pack quickly. He placed some food inside her satchel and helped her wrap the baby tightly. She stood on her own legs, still shaky, but stronger than yesterday. They moved out into the cold night, the sky above full of falling ash and distant thunder. Their breath formed clouds as they walked through the ruined land. Renya followed close behind, David keeping the baby close to her chest. After half an hour, David slowed down and looked back. "You doing okay?" She nodded. "I walk slow, but I walk." He smiled slightly. "That's all we need. Just keep moving." As they passed a broken communication tower, David's scanner beeped once. A weak signal flickered across the screen. Not a radar signal, but something else. He tapped the screen to isolate it. It was another message, broken and full of static. "The woman, if found. She carries the key. Do not let her fall." David froze. His eyes widened. The signal was old but recent enough to matter. He turned to Renya. "You carry something important." She looked down, then carefully reached into her torn uniform. From a hidden pouch she pulled out a tiny metallic disc glowing faintly with blue lines. David took a slow breath. "What is that?" she whispered softly. "The last code of my people. They destroyed everything. This is all that remains." David looked at her with new eyes. She wasn't just a widow or a mother in need. She was the final voice of a fallen race, and the baby in her arms was the last of her blood. "We have to protect you," he said. This just became bigger than survivalry. Naya looked up into his eyes, and for the first time her lips curved into the faintest smile. A tired one, but real. "Then we go together," she said, and so under a dark sky covered in ash, a human and an alien mother walked toward the unknown, holding between them the last hope of a lost world. Asterisk. The morning was gray and silent. Ash floated down from the sky like dead snow. Renya followed close behind David, her steps slow but steady. The baby was wrapped tight against her chest, protected from the cold wind. David led the way, carefully watching each step. The old world around them was full of danger broken. Towers leaned like tired giants. The ground cracked. In strange shapes from old battles, burned-out vehicles lay scattered across the path, rusted and forgotten. Each corner could hide a trap, or worse, a scavenger. They moved between fallen walls and collapsed buildings. David used his knife to mark small lines on stones, guiding their way back if needed. Renia didn't speak much, but her eyes were alert, always scanning her surroundings. She looked at David differently now, not with fear, but with something like quiet trust. After an hour, David stopped beside a pile of rubble. He held up his hand. Renia paused behind him, listening. He crouched low and placed his hand on the ground. A faint vibration came through the earth, something mechanical moving nearby. Scavenger drone, he whispered. Stay low. And silent. Renia knelt down, holding the baby close. David peeked around a cracked wall and saw it, a small round drone with metal claws and a blinking red eye. It hovered low, scanning for movement. Scavenger drones weren't fast, but they were dangerous. If they saw weakness, they attacked. David waited until the drone turned away, then motioned Renia to move. They slipped behind a fallen transport vehicle, hearts pounding. The drone suddenly stopped mid-air and turned its red eye back toward them. It heard something. David pulled Renia behind the vehicle, then reached into his pouch. He took out a sonic stone, small and flat. He pressed the center and tossed it far to the left. It hit the ground and let out a high-pitched sound. The drone turned quickly and rushed toward the noise. Now, David whispered. They moved fast and silent, cutting through a narrow alley. The drone didn't follow. The sound distracted it long enough for them to escape. Renia looked at David and said softly, "You know how to fight them?" David gave a small nod. "Used to be recon special unit. We learned to avoid more than attack. Still works sometimes." She looked at him with quiet respect and said thank you. He didn't reply, but he gave a small smile before moving forward again. They walked until the sun was high, though its light barely broke through the smoky clouds. In the distance, tall rocks rose in the shape of a claw. David pointed toward them. "That's where the bunker is. Between those stones, hidden underground." Renia looked ahead and nodded. "I can walk more." David could see her body was tired, but her spirit had changed. She was no longer just surviving. She was walking toward something with purpose. As they neared the stones, David noticed signs of old battles. Burn marks on walls, blast holes on the ground. Skulls half buried in the dirt. War passed through here, he said, a long time ago. But sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. They climbed over a low wall and reached the rocky base. David found the stone he remembered, marked with 3 cuts. He pressed a button hidden underneath, and the rock slid aside, revealing a dark tunnel inside. He said quickly, "It's Sapphire." Renia entered first, then David closed the entrance behind them. Lights flickered on, revealing a narrow path leading down into a steel chamber. The bunker was small but strong. Reinforced walls, a power core, and storage lockers filled with supplies. A sleeping pod lay in the corner, still intact. "This is home for now," he said. Renia sat down slowly, setting the baby on soft padding. The child let out a soft cry, but quickly relaxed in the warmer air. David handed her a sealed meal pack and water. She accepted with both hands, her eyes tired but calm. David checked the communication console and found something unexpected, a message waiting from a few days ago. It wasn't from the Red Sun Raiders, it was from the Alliance. He read the message twice. "Alien survivor, located, signal beacon activated. Possible high-value asset." David looked back at Renia. "She didn't know yet." "Someone knows you're alive," he said quietly. "The signal from your pod, it reached Summonerian." Looked up. "Will they come to help?" David wasn't sure. Maybe. Or maybe they come to take what you carry." She placed her hand over her chest where the data disk was hidden inside her uniform. Her jaw tightened. "Then we stay hidden." David nodded. "We'll rest tonight, then decide what to do next." Baby reached up and touched David's sleeve with tiny fingers. David looked down, and for a moment, all the war, all the ruins, all the fear seemed to fade away. He gently touched the child's hand and said softly, "You're going to be okay." And in that bunker, beneath the broken world, a human and an alien mother found something stronger than survival hope. Morning came slowly inside the bunker. A dim orange light from the cracked ceiling showed the edges of the room. David stood at the control panel checking nearby signals, but nothing moved outside. No drones, no life forms, just silent. Syrian sat on the floor near the sleeping pod, rocking her baby gently. The child was awake, small eyes blinking at the world. Around them there was warmth and safety, and something else, something new. Peace. David walked over and placed a food box beside Rinya. She nodded softly, her voice still quiet, but stronger than before. Thank you. He sat down across from her, watching the child move. Its fingers curled and uncurled, its head turned toward David, eyes wide and full of wonder. He smiled and tapped the ground, lightly making a tiny beat. The baby watched, then tried to copy it, tapping its hand in the air, unsteady, but curious. Rianya's lips lifted slightly. She's never smiled before, she said. She never moved much, always weak, always cold. Not anymore, David said. You're both safe. Narenia opened the food box and pulled out dried fruit and grain slices. She tore small pieces and fed them slowly to the baby, then she ate a little herself. The taste was strange to her, but she didn't complain after the meal. David brought over a small metal cube. He pressed one side, and a soft light appeared floating above it. The baby stared and reached out, touching the light with wonder. It's just a training cube, he said, used for kids to teach patterns and colors. Rinya watched as the baby laughed suddenly, a sound so light it echoed across the cold steel walls. David froze. He blinked. The baby had laughed. Rinya gasped, covering her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. Her body shook just a little as the joy of that tiny sound filled her chest. She's never laughed before, she whispered. David sat back against the wall. The sound of that laugh was soft but powerful, a sound of life, a sound of something returning that they all thought was lost. They stayed silent for a few minutes, letting that small moment last. Then Rinya looked at David with new eyes, not just thankful but open. She reached into her cloak and pulled out the tiny glowing disc. She held it up toward him. You saved my child and me, she said softly. This belongs to you now. David shook his head. No, that's your legacy. Not mine. You protect it better than my own people, she said. David sighed and looked at the disc. What's inside? Everything, she said softly. Culture, language, medicine, knowledge. They burned our cities but couldn't erase this. David nodded slowly. That's why they hunted you, to stop this from surviving. Yes, she said, and they will come again. David stood up and checked the scanner again. Nothing. But he didn't feel at ease. He looked back at her. You said your sister sent a message before she died. She did, Rinya said. It warned others, but no one came. Maybe they're coming now, David said. Maybe the Alliance will track it. Rinya touched her baby's head. They never came before. Why now? David didn't answer. He didn't know the answer. A small beep came from the side scanner. A coded pulse. Not from Raiders, not from Alliance. It was something else. He pressed a button and heard static, then a voice. Survivor signal detected. Shelter confirmed. Prepare for retrieval. David looked at Rinya. Someone's coming. Her eyes narrowed. Not friend, not foe. We don't know yet, he said. She stood slowly, holding the baby, her voice calm. If they come for the disc, I will not go with them. David met her eyes. Then I won't let them take you. Rinya blinked, and for a moment said nothing. Then she walked over and placed her hand on David's shoulder. Thank you for seeing me, not just as a creature, not just a refugee, but as a mother. He looked at the baby, who now held a piece of cloth like a toy, giggling softly again. That laugh. That changed everything. Maybe they didn't just find each other. Maybe they became a family without realizing it. David whispered, you're not alone anymore. Rinya, not ever again. Outside, the scanner beeped again. The signal was closer. Something flew above the ruins, fast and quiet, but not yet near. David stood ready, not afraid, not uncertain. For the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. David stood near the bunker entrance, his eyes fixed on the scanner. The signal was getting closer. Whatever was coming was fast. It wasn't the Red Sun Raiders, and it didn't match any Alliance beacon. It was something else, something unknown. Rinya stayed inside, holding her baby close. She watched David through the soft light of the bunker. Her heart beat faster, but not from fear, from something deeper. A feeling she hadn't known in a long time. David turned to her. "They'll be here in less than an hour. We need to decide now. Do we wait or run?" Rinya looked down at her child. The baby was quiet, eyes wide, as if sensing something coming. She took a breath and walked over to David. "I don't want to hide anymore," she said softly. "But I don't want them to take her." David nodded slowly. "We don't know who they are. They might help us, but they might not." Naya placed the glowing disc back inside her cloak and looked into David's eyes. "If they come to take the knowledge, I will not give it. If they come to harm her, I will fight you." "Won't be alone," he said. They moved together through the bunker, packing food, weapons, blankets. Naya strapped the baby against her chest and held a small stun pistol in her right hand. David carried his pulse rifle and a short-range MP blaster. He led them through a side exit, hidden behind rusted pipes and metal boxes. The path led up a narrow tunnel and opened into the ruins above. The air outside was colder, the wind sharper. The sky was gray and shaking with clouds of ash. They moved quickly through broken buildings, staying low behind fallen walls and shattered glass. They reached a half-collapsed tower where David had once stored backup supplies. He opened the hatch inside the floor and handed Rinya a small oxygen mask. "This place is shielded from above," he said. "They won't find us right away." Naya sat down carefully, resting the baby in her arms. The child let out a soft whimper, and she gently rocked her back to sleep. David turned on the silent comms receiver and listened. A signal came through, strong and clear. "Now prepare for surface entry. Drone sweep in progress. 2 biosignatures confirmed. Proceeding to contact." David whispered to himself. "They found you." As a soft hum filled the air like distant thunder. Naya grabbed his hand and pointed up through a crack in the tower wall. A black triangular ship was descending without sound. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal. 3 small drones flew ahead of it, scanning the ground. "They know where we are," she said quietly. David gripped his weapon. "No time to ruin." A sharp mechanical voice echoed from outside. "We come in peace. Place your weapons on the ground. Step into view with the artifact." David and Rinya looked at each other. She held the baby tight and shook her head. "No." David looked at the comm unit and pressed the speaker. "What do you want?" he asked. The voice replied, "The disk contains forbidden data. Return it and your lives will be spared." David narrowed his eyes. "Forbidden to who?" The voice didn't answer. He turned to Rinya. "What do you want to do?" She looked down at her child. Her voice calm but strong. "I want to live, but not as a prisoner, not as a tool." "Then we stand," she said. David reached into his pack and pulled out a small jamming beacon. He activated it and tossed it outside. A wave of static spread across the area. The drones jerked in the air, losing direction, and crashed into nearby walls. Ship paused in the air, blinking with red lights. Then a ramp lowered slowly and a tall armored figure stepped out. Its body was metal and black with glowing red veins. A voice came from inside its helmet. "You are making a mistake." David aimed his rifle. "I've made worse ones." The armored figure raised a weapon and fired. A blue pulse flew past David's head, burning a hole in the wall. David fired back, hitting the figure in the leg. It stumbled but didn't fall. Rinya stood beside David now, her eyes burning with fury. She raised her stun pistol and fired at the figure's head. It sparked, and the helmet shattered, falling to the ground. A cold machine face flickered with fading lights and collapsed into dust. The ship above made a high-pitched sound, then flew off, disappearing into the cloud silence. "Return." David lowered his weapon, breathing hard. Rinya stepped forward and looked down at the broken machine. "They weren't here to help," she said. David nodded. "No, they were here to erase you." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "You chose to stay. You could have left and leave you alone," he said. "Not a chance." They stood there among the ruins, wind brushing through their hair. A human and an alien, a soldier and a mother, a teen. "Let's go back," David said. "We'll protect this knowledge together." And Rinya replied, "Yes, for her, for the future." 3 days had passed since the silent battle among the ruins. The strange ship had vanished into the sky, leaving no trace. No more drones, no more signals. Just silence. David and Renia had returned to the underground bunker, but something had changed. The bunker no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like home. David repaired the power system using old wires and spare parts. The lights were steady now, not flickering. The air filters worked again, making the air feel cleaner. Renia had organized the supplies, folding cloths, making the corner space just for her baby. The small sleeping mat was lined with warmth packs and soft fabric cut from David's old jackets. The baby was stronger. Now she responded to sound, smiled more, and even giggled. When David made silly faces, her little hands reached out for everything, as if she wanted to touch the whole world. David watched her one morning while Renia was asleep. She looked up at him with wide eyes and reached for his face. He let her grab his finger and she squeezed it with surprising strength. "You're a fighter just like your mother," he whispered. When Renia woke up, she found David sitting cross-legged with the baby in his lap, telling her a story using pieces of metal and nuts as characters. She smiled at the scene. Her heart felt something it had not felt since the war began. Peace. David noticed her watching and said softly, "She likes heroes. I told her you were one." Nia chuckled a little. "I'm no hero. I only ran." David shook his head. "You didn't run. You survived. You protected her. You carried your people's last light. That's not weakness. That's strength." She sat beside him and looked at the tiny glowing disc on the table beside them. The disc still held the Shelby memories of her people, all their songs, teachings, medicine, hopes, and dreams. It was now the last archive of a lost civilization. "We can't keep it hidden forever," she said. "Someone has to know. We'll choose the right people." David said, "We don't need to trust the Alliance or the Raiders. We find someone new, someone better." Nia nodded and placed her hand on the disc. "I won't let them be forgotten." That night the bunker felt warm. The baby slept soundly, wrapped in layers of cloth and love. David stood at the entrance looking out at the dark world above. Renia joined him holding 2 mugs of heated water. "This planet was never meant to hold life," she said softly. "Yet here we are." David took the mug from her and smiled. "Maybe that's what makes it special. Life is stubborn. It always finds a way." They drank quietly for a while. Then Renia said something unexpected. "You should name her." David looked at her confused. "Me?" "Yes, you saved her life. You gave her food, shelter, and laughter. You held her when I couldn't. She would not be here without you." David looked through the doorway toward the sleeping child. He thought for a while, then spoke with care. "Luma," he said softly. "It means light in the old earth tongue." Renia closed her eyes, letting the name settle on her heart. Luma, a light born in darkness, a memory, a promise. She turned to David and whispered, "Then we are family now." David didn't speak. He only nodded, but inside something deep shifted. He had wandered this broken galaxy alone for too long. Now he was no longer alone. The next morning they began building something new. David found solar panels among the wreckage and set them up to power the bunker. Renia rewired the old communication system, adding encryption layers from her people's tech. They planted seeds in old containers using rich soil from the valley below. One night, they carved 3 marks into the wall. One for Renia, one for David, and one for Luma. The story of the bunker was no longer one of hiding. It was one of starting again. They taught each other words from their languages. They shared memories. David told her about earth, oceans, stars, forests. Renia told him about her home, its floating gardens, singing birds, tall glowing trees. Time passed, but they never forgot the danger out there. They trained every day. David taught Renia how to shoot, defend, track. Nia taught him how to recognize enemy signals, spot fake drones, break into locked networks. Together, they were more than survivors. They were a family. One day far in the future, a signal would leave that bunker. Not a cry for help, but a message of peace and truth. A message carrying the last voice of a dead world and the first voice of a new beginning. But until then, day at a time, one meal, one laugh, one step forward in a broken world where everyone else had turned their backs. One Human had chosen to feed a stranger and gain something no war could ever destroy: love, family, and the rebirth of hope.